So welcome to Learning to Fly and our second episode where we jump into the theme of Children's Planet. Children's Planet. What does that mean? And where do we begin thinking that we live in this world where we are, we still have a lot to learn. And one of the reasons why many of us look to working through teachings and aspiring to self-growth and things is because we recognize that there are parts inside of us that are still immature and still need some growing and some maturing. And so that's one of the ways in which the elders speak about this planet that we live on, that this is the children's planet. And it's the place where we come to learn about our physical reality in the weightiest of substance that we can experience as human beings.
It was really beautifully put. Many of the stories that have been handed down over the millennia from the elders of the Twisted Hairs need to be seen metaphorically. And the way you just described that is so true, that we are here to learn and grow and to learn how to move from crawling to walking to running to flying.
I love how it keeps coming back to learning to fly.
Yeah. That image of the young bird standing on the edge of the nest or the branch or the cliff. And that moment of risk and that moment of self-trust and how they mix together into an exhilarating cocktail of anxiety and excitement and all the ways in which, if we recall back to our childhood, how we often responded and reacted to new and exciting things. And so it is the children's planet that we have come to do what the elders call is our great work. Our great work is learning to grow up. But growing up and having fun doing it. You know, if we think of the term children's planet, then we substitute planet for playground.
Absolutely. And there's so many wonderful things to explore in this playground.
Exactly.
That is our world.
Yeah. And so we have such a buffet, a smorgasbord of things to celebrate and enjoy and explore and discover on this planet. But the great work is for us to be in alignment with this planet, to find our place in it where we stop impacting things adversely, negatively, where we still bring willful harm.
Most especially inside of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Because how it happens inside of us is ultimately how we end up engaging with the children's planet outside.
Yeah. And if we were to reduce the size of the playground or the planet to just ourselves, that we are each residing in our own planet, in our own playground, that nobody can know, nobody can touch my experience of reality. It's impossible. We can get close. We can have moments where we feel we are in sync and in unison, but it's impossible to duplicate.
Astral bodies revolving around one another.
Yeah. So the great work then is to be the unique individual that we each are, without the need to fear or restrict or repress that natural self. You know? And that takes courage. That same courage that young fledgling bird has to ask itself to take in order to fly. Right? And those of us who hear that call and are willing to fly are the ones who are no longer willing to settle for normality, the mundane way of living. Right? We want our lives to be richer and fuller of discovery, fuller of expansion.
I love what you said there about us being our own planet. I mean, this beautiful vessel, this altar, this temple that is our physical body, is the only way in which we can engage with the world around us. And so to just even hold that attitude inside of each of us of this being the children's planet, and continually looking for ways in which maturity can occur, and healing can occur, and growth and evolution can occur, which is inevitable anyway. I mean, we look at ourselves from those newborn babies and how we evolve and we grow, and this process of life that is continually unfolding in our movement chronologically. And there are some of those beautiful images, I'm not sure what the artist's name is, of where the images from the birthing process and the child growing through adolescence into adulthood, and then the withdrawal back into old age and back into death again. And to just recognize that cycle of life that happens within this children's planet, not only with us, but also with nature around us. Which brings us to the Song of the Four Directions, which is another medicine wheel teaching. And tonight we're going to be sharing this wheel with you that has 5 directions. So 4 around the outside and the center, the hub that holds the 4 of them together.
But before you go on to that, I just want to add something.
Yes.
What we're about to speak about is the elements that we seek to understand how something works, right? So the whole movement of science and that need to take things apart in order to understand how they work, right? If we are our own planet, then it's up to us to get to know and become intimate and knowledgeable about what makes up this planet.
Right.
No one else is in charge of it except us. So,
me, I'm in charge of you? Yes. No. As much as I might like to think I am sometimes.
So if I'm in charge of this planet, then I have options. Let me say it a different way. We come to a point where we realize that we are responsible for our self-care. And in that acknowledgement, we start to address all the ways in which we haven't been responsible.
Yes.
And then we start to, in taking action to correct that, we have to understand how we're put together. And so tonight is going to be an exploration into those basic components that make up our own personal children's planet.
So in the Song of the Four Directions tonight, we're going to be looking at the very first born of Grandmother Earth's body. We're going to be looking at those elements, and it's amazing how these elements are around us and within us all the time, and how easily we can take them for granted. Just think about breath and the element of air, and how much attention we do or don't give to our breathing, and how much we live in survival breath, you know, and yet breath is the essence of life. If we're not breathing effectively and taking in the fullness of life, it's probably stands to reason that we're not going to be able to be fully present in all the endeavors that we are taking on as the children's planet.
True.
You know, the earth and the water and the air and the fire. and how these elements relate to our body, relate to our mind, relate to our hearts, and even our emotional intelligence, and our spirit, and how easily distracted we can become, or how much we can shift ever so slightly in order to put our attention and focus on the things that truly feed and support the maturing and the growth and the great work of this children's planet.
Mm-hmm. Are you going to keep going here?
Well, I was thinking about just the blessed, before we move into the wheel, we have the Blessed Beauty way there. And I think that just sharing that as we allow this Song of the Four Directions and this elemental alignment and these basic components of who we are inside of our children's planet to awaken, it speaks to the way in which we do our great work and the way in which we choose to walk through life, that we choose to leave behind footsteps of beauty, and we choose to step forward towards the most beautiful attraction that we can possibly do, and that we can also find ways inside of ourselves to acknowledge and celebrate the things that, the pieces of beauty that we carry, which is not always easy as human beings. It's so easy to get caught in the ugliness that we perceive about ourselves. So we'll bring the teaching tonight to completion with this ceremony called the Blessed Beauty Way Prayer, which helps to align and integrate those pieces of who we are. So here on the screen, we have the foundational framework of the medicine wheel. And already last week, we were talking about the wheel using the directions of the compass point as a way of understanding which direction we look into and getting a sense of the personalities of each of the directions. So here you can see that there are some colors, and there are the four cardinal directions, the north and east and south and west, and even the center. And you'll also notice here that there are some dots in each of the four directions. So east being one dot, which I'm just realizing perhaps we should have started in the east, but we won't. We'll start in the south. 2 in the west, 3 down in the south, and 4 up in the north. And in the center there is what we call a bar. And the bar is a representation of 5. So this is what we call in the numbering system the dot bar method, which was used by the ancient Mayans. So tonight we start in the south.
Okay. It's already there.
And obviously the color is red down here. So you can see that all the writing is in red. And when we speak about the south, the red opens us up to that connection to our hearts, the emotional aspects of who we are as human beings. So within the children's planet of every human being across this planet right now, every human being has an emotional aspect. But the question is, how intimate, how available, how much are we in relationship to our emotions and what we feel and what we don't feel? And how much judgment and comparison do we place upon the things that we feel or don't feel?
I want to talk about water.
That's why I was looking to you.
So if we think of the element of water in all of its forms, there is a uniqueness to how it moves and how it morphs and how it slithers and slides and ripples and crashes in so many different ways. How it feels when it's boiling, how water feels when it's frozen. And in those same variations of expression that water has for us to experience, we have many, many countless more ways to experience our emotions.
Mm.
But they have a beautiful mirror effect of each other. So as I was speaking about frozen waters and how we can freeze our emotions or feel frigid about something, cold-hearted, right? Or if our blood boils and we are seething with anger and steam is spewing out of our nostrils and our ears, there is quite a relationship there.
Mm-hmm.
And so water, the element of water, is the most directly associated to us and our planet inside of our emotional movements and expressions. And the challenge we have, though, is in our relationship with certain emotions and our willingness to experience them all. If we look at our children's planet as the planet we live upon, the energy or the consciousness that governs how this planet functions, I don't believe seeks to stop any of the ways that its waters express themselves. Mm-hmm. So if there's a tempest or a hurricane or a tornado,
or a tsunami,
exactly, or an earthquake, right? You know, how often do we experience those shaking, quaking moments as well, when our emotions kick up? So that association of water and emotion is the most relevant. It's the most accurate mirror for us to understand this planet. Now, another thing about emotions, as I said, is that we judge emotions, we categorize them. We have good emotions, bad emotions, secret emotions, emotions that we have promised ourselves we will never ever express and let anybody see.
Or on the other side, explosive emotions.
Yes, exactly. Tempestuous ones.
Yes.
The challenge here is how we relate to them and feel about them, because that creates an emotional impact as well. Right? So if we have certain emotions that we prefer not to have, all that does is amplifies our fear of how to engage with life. We're afraid to go into certain situations because we don't want to stir up that emotion. Right? And so we shut ourselves off from parts of life.
Hold ourselves back.
That, if we think of that child in us, is often how a child will behave when they feel hurt.
And just bringing up the subject of the child and how the child engages with their emotions, and how often as a parent we will prevent a child from feeling their emotions or expressing their emotions. So even as children, we probably all have stories of the ways in which we were taught to dam our emotions or not show certain emotions or only show certain emotions. And so that created a very important template for us as to what our relationship was with the very waters that flow through our bodies. And so if the South sings of the fluidity of the waters, then it stands to reason that as our children's planet, we too need to learn how to sing with the fluidity and the movement and the health of our inner waters. Because if we dam our waters up and we prevent our emotions from being experienced in their honesty, we will make ourselves sick. We will create dissonance inside of the body.
Exactly. It's the same as damming up water and stopping its flow and movement.
Mm-hmm.
And that stagnant water becomes poisonous to us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if we dam our waters and stop them from flowing, as in our emotions, then those emotions that have been unexpressed are still trapped inside of us. And over time, they do start to pollute us, and they show up in sickness, illness, disease.
Mm-hmm.
So, knowing this, that it could be the direction that we go in if we stay in our immaturity, and that bratty little child who doesn't want to grow up, doesn't want to get over it, because that part of us is the resistant part, the one that's afraid to take the jump and fly.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the one that's afraid it won't survive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But one of the qualities of water and how water can teach us how to be in resonance, in harmony, in a far more effective movement of energy through our emotions, where we're not worried about what we're going to feel,
Mm-hmm.
is to look at water's quality of how it gives itself
to whatever container it's flowing through.
It gives itself, it surrenders itself, it flows to whatever will receive it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we spill water on a piece of marble, it will sit and pool for a very long time. Its ability to receive the water is hard.
But that doesn't stop the water from just giving itself.
Exactly. It still gives itself.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment something changes, it will move, or it'll evaporate with the heat. And that's that cyclical movement of water that is also teaching us how to be more in harmony with our emotions, is to know that our waters, if we look at the waters of the sea that move and are fed by the rivers, and that the rivers are fed by the rains, and that the rains are fed by the evaporation from the oceans, and back to the oceans being fed by the rivers.
That whole water cycle is a beautiful analogy for our emotions, to allow ourselves to give ourselves permission to flow with what we're feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I know from experience that for many, we've dammed our emotions up for so long, and we've created such destructive patterns with how we relate to our emotions that it can be very challenging in the beginning to learn how to feel anger effectively, to have the effective outlet for the waters to flow. Because we know when the tap is on and the hose pipe is closed, that pressure that builds up in the pipe is at some point going to burst.
Well, I have the other image of standing at the bottom of the dam, the wall of the dam, and kind of like Jenga, trying to decide which block I'm going to pull out, for fear that if I pull out the wrong one,
the waters will give themselves to me.
Oh yeah, that destroy everything in sight
and carry us away. And that is a concern, because if our waters are so intimately related to our emotions, it's natural that we have this concern for being carried away with our emotions and taken by them. But as you were sharing about the water cycle, to just recognize that no emotion is ever going to stay.
No.
Emotions are continually moving and flowing. And so even those moments of anger or frustration or hatred or whatever negatively labeled emotions we may have been feeling, if we learn how to give ourselves permission to give those emotions their timing and their expression, that they won't stay out of their natural cycle.
Right. Now, the other part of the giving that we have to pay heed to is what we are feeling. So what I am feeling has nothing to do with or is the cause of someone else.
Right.
Right?
That's
And
not
so,
an easy one to
I
wrap our brains around.
I know.
If you're upset with me, I feel very hurt at the effect of your emotions.
And you feel responsible.
And I feel responsible too.
And it's very easy for me to then think it's your fault and blame you for what I'm feeling. And that's the game we have to stop playing. That's that childish game of you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you back.
Yeah.
Or you hurt me, and I'm not going to play with you anymore.
Right. So I'm going to freeze my emotions and keep you at a distance.
Yeah. How I feel about something cannot be controlled by you. And often difficult to be controlled by me. Right? So instead of always trying to be in control of what I'm feeling, because if we look at our planet, she's not controlling her waters. They have that cyclical movement that we've already spoken about. Right.
As those clouds get heavy and darker, so they fall to the ground. There's no holding back.
Yes. And then those rains pull together and swell the rivers, which then floods into the lakes and into the oceans and on and on. Right? And so if we allow ourselves, if we allow ourselves to feel our emotions for what they are, we also have to acknowledge that we're the ones who are choosing to feel that, or we're the ones that are having that experience.
Right. Because sometimes emotions don't always feel like they're our personal choice.
Right.
You know, and so taking responsibility, which is another act of maturity within this children's planet, taking responsibility for an emotion or a feeling that I'm having, and even just finding the space or the acceptance inside of myself to just be okay with feeling shitty if I'm feeling shitty right now.
Yeah.
And as you said, not to make it anybody else's fault, including my own fault, that I can just allow that feeling to be present with me and trust in that process. Just as Grandmother Earth's body moves the waters, so too shall the waters inside of me and that emotion move as well.
Yeah. That's beautifully put. Yeah. So let's move on to the next direction, shall we?
And just before we do that, we can also just remind you that one of the ways of starting to unravel those emotions that you may feel is to go and sit with different bodies of water, to spend time outside in a rainstorm, to go and sit by a waterfall, or to find a still pool, or to be in the ocean, or go and find a lake and find ways of connecting to water to help you to learn how to move those waters inside, how to give the space you need to yourself to feel the emotions that need to arise.
Sometimes it can be as simple as standing under the shower.
Yes, I know that was the act that I did for myself of care in preparation for tonight's teaching, was to just go and stand under the shower and let the waters wash through and wash away the day, so that I could bring myself to the presence of the moment.
Okay.
So we look to the west, and here in the west we find the earth. And so the west sings of stability and endurance. We think about the earth and we can't help but feel the grounding that the earth offers us. In fact, today we were out in the garden planting a beautiful willow tree that we were gifted. And so I had my feet deeply in the earth, and I could just feel the sands and soils moving below my feet. And although it's on quite a hill, and things were easy to move, there was still this very grounding sensation that I gained from being present in the earth.
The word I hear there is solidity.
Solidity, absolutely, yes.
That even though that soil moved beneath your feet or gave way to a point, and then you could feel that solidity, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so connecting with the elements of earth is a beautiful tool that we can use to learn about that stability and grounding and solidity that our physical bodies give us. Yeah. Even after that, I actually went down further into the garden, and there was this old anthill. And it was quite fascinating to see how the integrity of this anthill was still there, even though there's so much open spaces within the hill itself. And yet there was still this integrity and the strength that this small hill or this anthill was offering, you know.
So our bodies are that physical expression of this planet that we are in charge of, right? Welcome to the planet Lou, and beside me is the planet Laurel. If I don't keep this body's health, then I suffer the consequences of those actions, right? And one of the things we can see in the Earth's ecosystem, in her maintenance of her health, despite all the ways in which we have wreaked havoc on her health, you know, where we have injected all kinds of poisons on her body, and yet she has her way of healing, of correcting, of returning to balance. And within herself, she's not looking for any external intervention in her own self-healing. She's not reaching out for a pill or an injection.
Or saying, human, you've done terrible things to me. Help me heal now.
Instead, she is self-healing because she has within herself the intelligence or access to the intelligence to allow it to happen.
To hold herself with the intimacy she needs to allow that transformation to occur.
So an example is that recent oil spill that happened in the Gulf of Mexico a few years ago, and how catastrophic it was. And yet nature is still, it's not like she has a whole bunch of safeguards in place to protect against that, like we would as humans. What she does is she deals with whatever happens as it comes. But she has access to the intelligence to know how to do that.
Right.
Well, if we could become more present to what our bodies tell us, if we could learn to listen more to what those little signals are about, then I have a feeling that we too will tap into that same kind of intelligence.
Right. And we know that there is this innate ability inside of us to make changes that need to be made.
Right.
Yeah.
We often know without seeking outside advice what it is.
Right. And there's such a deep intelligence in our physical earth bodies anyway. I mean, we have so many systems in our bodies that work without any conscious awareness. You know, even though we still need to inhale and exhale breath, we have a whole respiratory system that sends that air through the body and aerates and does what it needs to. We have a circulatory system and a heart system and a digestive system as well that knows how to take in the nutrients or the food that we give, process what needs to be processed, take what body parts and release and let go of the things that aren't really of service to us.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's such a miracle that happens within these physical bodies that can so easily be taken for granted.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it does go back also to the health and well-being of our waters,
yes,
of our emotions, because as we've already identified, if we are polluting ourselves with unexpressed emotions, repressed emotions, bottled up emotions, labeled or named negative emotions, then that's like constantly having these toxic oil spills on our bodies. Right.
And the energy there, as we can see in the West with our body, is holding.
Right.
So if we're not moving our emotions through, our body's going to end up holding that toxicity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that moves us to a different example, like Chernobyl, where the kind of toxicity that was in Chernobyl was to a more severe degree, that so much life was destroyed. And yet again, the earth is healing her wounds.
Right. She held herself for the time period that it took to start transforming and moving into a different kind of health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
it's quite phenomenal to see that after so many years after that nuclear explosion, that life is coming back.
Yes. Yeah. So no matter how tragic our stories, no matter how dramatic and traumatic our wounds have been, no matter how deep we feel them, we still have the capacity, the intelligence, the wherewithal to heal.
Mm-hmm.
It is not outside of us to find that ability to do this. It's encoded, it's held like the earth holds everything on her body, and within her body, we too have that same ability.
Right. And I can't help but feel that word holding is such a beautiful reminder to us of learning to hold ourselves like we would a little child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's so easy for us to have little kids running around, whatever relationship they are to us, and one of them grazes their knee or comes across something painful. And our instinct is to reach out and to hold them and to be caring and tender with them. And yet so often we overlook that with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned something earlier that is very important in our relationship with being in health in our bodies, is to hold ourselves as that little child and to learn the language of our body, to learn to understand what our bodies are telling us.
Mm-hmm.
If we have an ache or a pain or a dissonance, or we have something that continually repeats itself, that's the body trying to tell us something, trying to communicate something.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not always be something that we can make sense of. Sometimes it takes that time for us to hold ourselves intimately in order to get to the place where we can actually listen to what the message is that the body has to say.
It's very.
Yeah.
And one thing I know that is not easy to overcome is the impulse to fix.
Yes. Oh, I have a headache. Pill will fix.
Right. Yeah. Once again, an external intervention.
Right.
Right. Instead of saying, okay, how can I connect to this energy and allow whatever I need to guide me, or to listen to what is it I really need right now.
Yes. Yeah. And oftentimes, by the time our body is communicating to us, we already have forgotten what the trigger may have been.
Yes.
Because if our triggers are often are always related into those emotions that we haven't expressed and haven't allowed to clear out, by the time it starts communicating to us in the body, we don't always know how to make that connection.
Right. And then we often only catch it when it's become chronic.
Yes, absolutely.
Or severe.
Yes. When we can't ignore it anymore.
Right. Yeah. And so in our great work is to become aware.
We go back to last week's teaching of awareness.
Exactly, because it's always underneath it all. And so to become aware of those subtle messages, to be more sensitive to those gentle vibrations, those little tremors. And I was thinking of how life on the planet, let's say you're near a fault line and there are little tremors happening in the earth, that the life in that area knows and senses things that we often aren't aware of.
Yes.
And so we need to become that sensitive. Our own Geiger counters, no, well, is that what it is? I can't remember.
Something like that.
Seismic.
Seismic counter, yes.
Yeah. To read our own subtle vibrations to better sense what's happening in our bodies.
Before it becomes an earthquake or a volcano erupting.
Exactly.
Because that's often what happens, right?
Or a whole island sinks below the sea.
Yes, yes. So just to give you a very simple tool here in how it is that you can start becoming more intimate with your earth lodge or your physical body is to begin your day with movement. Put on some interesting music. Sometimes it could be slow and sometimes it could be fast and sometimes it could just be in silence. But to begin your day, even if you start before you get out of bed in the morning, by really taking a few moments to stretch into your body and to just allow the creases and wrinkles to unravel and unfold and to find a way to be present in the movement of what your body needs. Like, it seems so simple and sometimes it can be so easily overlooked. But being able to move your body in a way that is tender and intimate, like you would hold that little child, is a beautiful way to just start the journey of listening to what's going on inside. So let's move to the next direction of the wheel. And this is where we move up into the north. And in the north, this is where the wheel sings to us of the flexibility of the winds, of change, of the ability for the winds to blow through and clear and cleanse. We think about standing at the edge of a cliff and just letting the wind blow through us, or even standing on a beachfront and have the wind blowing us around, and how chaotic that can feel sometimes, you know. Just think about the different kinds of winds. I love what you said earlier about the waters, and even the winds have different ways in which they manifest themselves. Sometimes there is such a still day that you can almost not feel a single breath of air, and yet we know that it's there. And at other times, we have raging winds. I mean, we live in a country that doesn't necessarily experience things like hurricanes or tornadoes, but that doesn't mean that they're far from our reality or awareness when we can see something like that moving on a screen in front of us and connect to that chaotic movement, that cyclical movement of the air blowing through a space. Yeah, I know that just as we took the tree down in the garden today, to see how many leaves had dropped because of the winds to the earth below, and how much that makes space for the tree to grow to have new growth, instead of holding on to those old leaves and old parts of itself.
So one of the things that air offers us is movement, flexibility, in a different way than the other elements, in its own unique way, and that it can also have force. It can be gentle. It can destroy.
Yes.
So it can clear things away.
Break things down.
Break things down.
rearrange things.
Yes. Sounds like some of the ongoing, repetitive, negative thoughts that are like debris in between my ears.
Right. Up in that skull-sized kingdom.
Yeah, and how beneficial it would be to allow the air, or to air out my mind, my thoughts, the incessant dialogue, the negative chatter, the distraction, the worry, the concern, all those thoughts that gnaw and irritate, to allow the air to just blow away those dust mites. Another thing I find fascinating about air is how intangible it is. And yet, if I put my attention there and I sense it, I can feel the subtle movements. Very gentle, slow, soft caress, and a shift in temperature across my skin. So if we can pause, silence what's going on inside of our heads, that's one way for us to come back into contact with what we're feeling in our emotions, what we're feeling, sensing in our bodies. Often we get so caught up in the busyness in our minds that we feel like we have this constant whirlwind going on, that there is no calm air. It's all turbulent.
And in that turbulence, sometimes we're not even aware that there's turbulence going on.
Yeah, it just feels normal,
right.
You know? And oftentimes we get uncomfortable because we think we should be busy. And so we get busy in our minds. We get busy thinking about all the different things we should be doing. And there is no should be doing. Another piece of our great work is to just be. Each moment is an opportunity to absorb the fullness of its experience.
I can't help but think of that image you conjured earlier of the little fledgling taking a leap into the unknown. And we've often watched those youngsters learning how to fly and how the parents teach them. And it doesn't seem like there's much thought going on. It's an intuitive just letting go and surrendering to the next moment of their growth and evolution. And yet as humans, we tend to hold on so much to all the thoughts and the beliefs and the constructs and the concepts of what we create in our minds, that it becomes so busy and we lose sight of anything that's important, most especially that being present to the moment.
And if we go back to that child, that resistant child, the bratty
petulant child.
Yeah, petulant child, I like that. It's going to use every trick in the book that it knows how to get its way. Right? And so it's going to fill our heads with nothing but noise. It's difficult to be present when the radio in your head is static. It's all white noise. Right? That's what that little child can sound like sometimes. It's incessant. So how can we possibly, if we are in that state, how can we possibly know what's going on and be present with what we're feeling?
Or be receptive, because if the energy up here in the north is about receiving, with all that noise and internal dialogue going on, there isn't a lot of space for us to be receptive to new thoughts or new ideas or new ways of being, or even to the process of growth and evolution that leads to our maturity. We're going to be stuck in that immature voice that keeps talking and talking and talking about what a bad person we are and how much we don't deserve and all the negative things that we've experienced so far. And there's not going to be very much space to receive the gifts of expansion and growth and clarity and flexibility that this North energy speaks about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in that receptivity that you speak about is how we learn, or that receptivity, I should say, is us learning how to tune the radio.
Right.
As we learn how to adjust our frequency by paying more attention, we start hearing other voices in our heads. The voice that is more curious about life, like that bird who is standing on the edge of the unknown and is saying, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to let go. Because if we're ever going to know and do that great work, which is to know ourselves, which is to know what it is to experience this particular lifetime. Why did we come here? Who did we come here to be? What is the purpose? If we don't start exploring that and be receptive to opportunities that are going to help us satisfy that need, that hunger, there's a true hunger inside of us where we continually quest for the unknown. And the unknown cannot be received if we think we've got it all figured out. I already know, so there's nothing I can learn.
So that also speaks to the ability for us as humans to step into a greater measure of free thinkingness. You know, if we're full of the ideas and constructs that we've created that make us feel safe and secure, there's very little space for us to be free thinking individuals, breaking through those places and spaces. Yeah.
And how often are we so full of our side of the story, and we think we're the only ones that are right. And so if I think I'm right and you think you're right, who's right?
Neither of us are going to be receptive to anything the other person has to say.
And so we're always going to be in a battle.
Right.
You know, the war of the worlds.
Yes.
Instead of the coming together of the worlds.
Right. And here in this mental aspect, I think there is value to recognizing that there is never only ever one right perspective. It's one of the things that I value so much in our relationship, is the ability that we've come to understand that even if I have a difference of opinion and I can't conceive of how it is you see something the way you do, that I still have enough space inside of me, or even respect, because I think there's some respect there, to acknowledge that even if I can't see it your way, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. You know, and that space that the wind creates inside of our minds to find more acceptance, not only with ourselves, but with one another, certainly speaks to less conflict and less war. Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the east.
Well, before we move to the east, a little tool here to be able to clear out your mind is to use a journal, or to spend a few minutes. In fact, time yourself for 5 minutes to begin with, or 10 minutes. Time yourself and open your journal and just write. Don't even think about what you're writing. Just let the words flow. Even if you don't pick up your pen, just keep writing. Even if you're saying, I don't know what I need to write right now, that's a really good opportunity. It's an exercise I use quite often with the sisterhood. It's a good opportunity of just being able to clear out some of that clutter and getting it out of the way. And then a really nice activity to do from that is to take what you've written and go and do a burning, do a giveaway as we move to the east of the wheel, where we find the fire. And so we look to the east, which sings of the expansion of the fire. It speaks and sings to the light of the fire, to the warmth and pleasure of the fire. You know, we're in the dark. What the first thing is that we would do is light a fire to be able to see and protect ourselves and keep warm and stay safe and feel secure. But also it helps to illuminate the space around us. A beautiful thing to recognize about the fire is that it continues to grow until it's consumed whatever it has to consume. You know, it never burns in the same place twice. And we have to continually to feed the fire in order to keep it burning constantly. And I know that for many people, the fire can be a very frightening energy to work with, because it can be so intense that if we feed it too much, it may threaten to burn us. You know. And even if we're trying to get it to light, I've seen many people trying to light a fire and trying to hold a lighter to a huge big log and expect it to burn. So there are different ways in which we need to learn how to engage with the fire and how to work with the fire.
Right. And fire connects us to our inspiration. If we think of the energy of fire and its determination, its desire, its drive, its hunger to consume whatever it touches.
Again, a very different energy to the other elements, a unique energy unto itself.
Yes. And we think of the fire that's inside of all of life and its continual striving to thrive, to exist, to be, to experience, to know life. I don't see anywhere in nature where there is something that's not living to its fullest, that is not burning like fire.
Yes. I'm just thinking about the weavers that have taken over the tree just outside the training center, and the fire inside of them to begin the moment the first light emerges in the morning, and they are already starting to feed their fire by flying backwards and forwards and keeping themselves busy with their innate need and drive to build the nest and to mate and to lay eggs and to procreate and to feed themselves. There's this internal fire that continues to keep them growing and burning and living.
That fire is also a spark. And without a spark, we can't ignite anything. Without the spark, we cannot create light. Light allows us to see. Light is life. And so the fire helps us to see within ourselves. What is it that inspires me? If I keep it in the dark, I'll never know.
You'll end up in that children's planet, staying immature.
I'll have a darkened
unhappy
planet. Okay. The planet revolves around the sun. She is always bathed in light somewhere and accepts her darkness where that sun is not shining. Well, we too have to accept every aspect of who we are. The parts we like, the parts we don't like. the parts we're willing to look at, and the parts we'd rather keep hidden. But the earth can't keep anything hidden from the sun, because not only does she revolve around the sun, she's spinning and exposing every part of herself. And so what this is teaching us is that willingness to look at ourselves in our totality, in our wholeness, in our completeness, instead of judging the parts that we feel are unsightly or don't belong.
Another thing comes to mind about the fire in our relationship with our internal fire is how much do we invest our fire in trying to do? Or on the other side, if we're trying to do so much, there's going to be a moment where we crash and our fires are probably going to feel like they're about to go out, and then we've got to try and wrestle up another fire again, you know. So just recognizing that relationship with the fire inside of us and how much energy we give to burning so brightly that we burn ourselves out until the point where we are so depleted, we just almost feel like we have no fire inside.
Another way that we are dissonant with fire energy is when we get scared. We dampen our fire. We make it small. That fire inside of us is where we find the passion. So if we're living dispassionate lives, it's a result of keeping our fire small.
And directly related to that spiritual aspect of the human being, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't to be misunderstood with our connection through religion, but more that spiritual aspect inside of us of the desire that we have to continually grow and expand and pursue our self-growth and shine the light in the darkest spaces and crevices and nooks and crannies inside of us to see what we're truly made of. As you started the conversation earlier about taking apart the components of our children's planet to really get to know who we are. And that spiritual desire to continually push our edge. You know, if I can achieve mastery in something, then I'm going to take that into the next evolution and apply it to the next level of mastery that I may want to achieve. And that's that human spiritual desire to keep growing just like the fire, and to use that determination, our ability to make choices and decisions about where it is we're going to step next and what it is we're going to do next.
And that's the part of the great work, that it is for us to live a life of passion, a life that feeds us, a life that we are proud of, a life that we want to be in. That's for us to determine.
Yes.
Right? And so the more I feed my fire, the more passionate life feels. Yeah.
And I can't help but feel like there needs to be, again, a level of respect there for honoring every human on whatever it is that feeds them. I know that that's one of the foundational birthing places of why we call ourselves sacred journeys, is the original realization that Blue had, that every human being needs to be respected and honored for their spiritual determination to live the life that they want to live, to make decisions that are going to be in alignment with their highest good. And that may not always look how we think it should look.
Right.
And in order to honor and respect that, not only inside of ourselves for our own choices and decisions, but also to extend that to others in acceptance for every human being. Yeah. And so it speaks to that great work that we have inside of us, but also how, as we learn to live our great work out, we also become the giveaway that finds more balance and harmony and more space and support for others to find their way to living their great work. Mm-hmm. And so a little ceremony or a little tool here in the East is to light a candle and to just spend a few moments sharing your dreams and desires as you light that candle, and you dream into the flame, and you use your breath, and you allow yourself to feel and receive and just be present to the beautiful glow and light of that candle. And a beautiful way of doing this in a dark room where you only have the light of that candle to just focus your full attention on, and to speak your heart's desire into that light so that you may find your way through. We bring the Song of the Four Directions into its completion, into the center of the circle. And here, the center of the wheel sings of the black hole, the void, the womb, the great nothing, and yet the everything. And this center of the wheel really can be seen and felt as the infinite container in which the potential for all things is present to be birthed.
When we look at the void, it's something that stretches us into uncomfortable spaces sometimes.
Absolutely.
I've done a lot of reading and research in how science perceives the void. And so far, it's that it exists, but it can't be proven. And that is the challenge of connecting to the void. And yet, when we find those moments of stillness, of complete emptiness, they can be fleeting. They can be seconds and disappear, or many seconds. But we know them. We've touched them. We've been there, and there is a quality of respite and rejuvenation and regeneration
and harmony
that can be felt there. Right? Because within the void is it's like the empty pot that is waiting for the ingredients for the soup to be made.
Right. The container or the space from which all the elements come in together to merge and mold into the whatever recipe that is going to produce the tasty meal.
Yes, and we are the ones that decide what we put in there. And that can only come from how willing we are to be unique. My recipe, my soup, can never be exactly like yours.
Even if the ingredients are the same.
Exactly.
And we follow the same instructions.
Yeah, exactly so. And so we need to be willing to tap into that uniqueness, that artistic expression, that willingness to do it our way, to be like Frank Sinatra. And proudly state at the end of our days, I did it my way. Because that's really, in truth, the only way I can do it anyway. Right. Even if I try and copy somebody, I still can only do it my way. It's an impersonation. Yeah. And it's often where we get caught up is we feel that who we are in our uniqueness doesn't measure up. We're odd, we're weird, we're different, you know. And anytime we feel challenged by that, anytime that's been pointed out, anytime we have felt awkward and quirky, like a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. But we were afraid that if we allowed ourselves to be that quirky person, that we would always be alone, separate. lost, perhaps.
Well, that void can feel pretty dark
Yeah.
and infinite and lonely and separate.
Yeah, it can.
Mm.
We can feel lost in that void. It's
Mm.
true. And so what we do is we reshape ourselves. We alter who we are. We cover up the parts of our uniqueness that we feel don't fit in or conform or belong to the norm, what everyone else says they're doing. The funny thing about that is everyone's doing the same thing.
We're all trying to measure up to an illusion.
Yeah.
Does it really
So
matter?
here I am pretending to be who I think you want me to be. And there you are pretending to be who you think I want you to be. And we are not investing our energy, that life force energy, in the one primary focus that we came here to invest it in, which is our great work.
Right. And so that sexual aspect really speaks to the willingness that we have to engage and invest our life force energy into birthing and rebirthing ourselves towards that ultimate idea of what the great work for us.
Mm-hmm.
To keep refining and assessing and working towards our levels of maturity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we touch the essence of sexuality and the pleasure that we derive from it, the bliss, that life can feel as blissful and as pleasurable in every way, equal to the sexual act.
Right.
Yeah.
So that melting pot, putting all those ingredients in and catalyzing them with life force energy, that the essence of life inside of us brings birth to magic.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And so that the soup each of us creates is meant to delight and tantalize all our sensations.
Seduce.
All of our senses. To make it this exquisite experience.
Right.
Knowing, though, that once we've eaten that soup and feasted on it, that we need to empty ourselves yet again.
And start again.
And start again. I go back to that image of the ocean and how the wave comes up and rises up onto the land and caresses the shore and then slides back down. You know, that there is this ebb and flow. And we too, on our planet, need that ebb and flow. It can't be all drive, right? We are going to burn it.
Right.
It can't be stuff and repress all the time. We're going to explode eventually, right? So tonight, the hope was to help to express how these elements that make up this planet we live on,
and the planets
and this planet that we live in, are essential for us to get to know, to understand, to work with, to harmonize with, to align with, whatever term or word that will work for you to help you heal your relationship with each element and help to move you on your great work.
And so the final tool in the center of the wheel is to use these elements as an assessment. So to take a few moments, perhaps on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and to feel which one of these elements you may be veering more towards. So as an example, if I take a moment and I do a check-in right now, and I just go around the wheel for myself, and I feel, well, what level are my waters at the moment? On a level of 1 to 5, my emotions are probably sitting at around a 4. My earth is probably sitting at around a 3. My air is sitting at around a 5, because I'm using a lot of my mind and my air right now to be able to connect to the knowledge that I'm trying to share. And my fire too, because these teachings feed me, is also sitting up at around a 5. And my sexual aspect right now is holding everything together around a 3. And that just gives me an assessment of where I am in whether I'm full or empty in terms of my emotions, my elements and my elemental balance. And it also gives me an indication as to if I have too much fire and too much air, perhaps I may be deficits in some of the other elements, which brings me out of balance. So it's like a quick check-in that I can use for myself to tell where I am in my elemental balance. Okay, so we move to the final piece of our teaching tonight, where we give you this personal ceremony. And this is such a simple and yet such a powerful ceremony that you can use also as a morning meditation or an evening reflection. This is a Navajo prayer, and it speaks to that energy of the great work we've been talking about the whole evening, about finding our way to the acceptance and the blessings of the beauty inside of us. And so it just takes a moment for you to sit and read through. This is something that you may want to print out and put up on your mirror or beside your bed that you can wake up with or you can go to sleep with. And it speaks to the ways in which you want to walk in beauty. That beauty may be above me, so that I may be a part of the greater beauty. That beauty is in front of me. That beauty is to the left of me and to the right of me, behind me, and that I can touch myself, I can touch life, and I can touch all others that I come into contact with beauty. And so we hope that you find a greater measure of your own beauty in the great work that is yours as you take these teachings into your heart and into your body and into your mind, and that they may feed your spirit and that they may catalyze you through your life force energy to birth yourself into even more of who you have yet to discover. Aho.